Candice Chirwa. I am a menstrual health activist, also known as the Minister of Menstruation. What's cool about my career is that I've got a nice balance between academia and on the ground work. So I'm currently doing my PhD on menstrual health, and I am the founder and managing director of a nonprofit in South Africa called Curate, where we run menstrual health and sexual and reproductive health workshops. I'm also a board member of the Menstrual Rights Global movement, which is really cool. And I'm a podcaster, author, professional speaker, and I am also a coffee addict. But with regards to my menstrual health career, I think what really fascinated me about period poverty is my own story. I think when I started my period at the age of 10, it was a very traumatic time for me. And I carried in a form of stigma and shame for 11 years until I turned 21. And it was through research in academia that I came across period poverty. There was a statistic that said 1 in 10 African girls miss out on school because of their period. And I was like, that is interesting. That needs to be unpacked. And whilst doing my master's on menstrual health, there was a lot of information about how girls feel when they have their first period. It is a very scary time. And that reminded me of my first experience. I was like, then something needs to be done, something needs to be addressed. And oftentimes in academia, there is a lot of production of like knowledge, but there's never like a production of solutions on the ground. And that's where Curate came about as a way to be the vehicle for change around menstrual health and how we eradicate period poverty and eradicate period taboos and stigma. And I thought because, I created this platform and we were documenting the experiences on social media, I was also sort of like an advocate for it in terms of speaking openly, in terms of how people need to take an individual responsibility to eradicate period poverty. So it was a male friend of mine that had a conversation with me to say, you know what, you're doing a lot of work around this topic. You should be known as the Minister of Menstruation. And we laughed, and I was like, but let me actually go with that. Let me change my social media handles. And it's called traction, which is really good because in South Africa we have a lot of ministers. Like we have a minister of sports, arts and culture, a minister of entrepreneurship, a minister of finance, a minister of electricity. And so it was like, what would society look like if there was a minister of menstruation? And that's the position I've taken on as a way to just create these conversations and normalize these conversations for individuals and also allow for a platform where people can learn about things. So yeah, that's my menstrual health career. I don't think when I started my period at the age of 10, if like a fairy had to come to me in that moment in the bathroom to say, you're going to be the Minister of Menstruation, that I would have taken it seriously because I would have been like, I literally feel like I'm dying right now. I don't think I want to do anything with my period in terms of my career, but here we are. And yeah, I'm really grateful for the journey so far. What I realize is because of the tagline changing the world one period at a time, it's ultimately having the opportunity to engage with as many people as possible, whether it be women, men, people who menstruate, girls and boys, as a way to just have these integral conversations that we often don't have. Because in our normal, like daily lives, we can talk about the weather, we can talk about politics, we can talk about, I don't know, this new TikTok challenge or whatever, but we never actually speak about the social, economic, political, and human right implications that period poverty has on people who menstruate. And so for me, it was a matter of how do I ensure that there is access to this information and knowledge no matter the platform? So obviously with Curate, we have the face-to-face interaction where we do the workshops in different spaces. But I thought that it was important to have a digital platform in which I, as the Minister of Menstruation, are using different formats. So whether that's podcast, whether that's Twitter Spaces, whether that's my LinkedIn, whether that's my blog, as a way for people who consume content however they choose to, still know that there's period positive content, because that's important, right? So no matter what platform I find myself, whether you read my blog on my website, Flowing Wisdom, you'll always find something that's fascinating to learn. Whether I'm writing a contribution in a book, it's always going to be something that you wouldn't generally think about. Whether it's a podcast, I think periodically speaking is an opportunity for us to not only just speak about our own personal experiences, but for me personally, it's a healing journey of unlearning my form of stigma that I had internalized for 11 years. And getting to share that with other people who menstruate, and also getting to celebrate and recognize other people who are creating period product organizations or period supplements, whatever they're doing in the space to create a period positive world. So it's nice because I get to wear different hats, right? So I can be a podcaster, then I can be the academic, then I can be the activist on the ground, then I can be the managing director of Curate. And it's always under the same guise of how do we ensure accessibility to information? How do we ensure that people feel empowered? Because I always want that interaction where if someone interacts with the Minister of Menstruation, they always walk off saying, I really learned something that I thought that I didn't think about. And that is important because it gets the conversation going, because that's how we get the social behavior change to occur, where someone will go home and say, I had a conversation with this person, and I'm curious to know, why is period poverty a thing? What can we do about it? That is important. Yeah. So this is fascinating because this is actually my PhD topic about how do we see menstrual health as a norm be adapted within the international system. And what I'm seeing is that majority of the work is being carried by your norm entrepreneurs. So that's your individuals, your activists, your organizations like Menstrual Rights Global, where it's a coalition of people trying to lobby for change. But there's never an element of the top coming to meet the bottom. It's always having to build towards. And I think that is the problem that lies within the menstrual health space, right? Because it can be often in times exclusionary, in which you have a massive coalition of individuals who all menstruate and want the experiences to be validated, who require accesses to services. And then what happens is that, there's not a specific platform in which they feel as if we can lobby for this change, in which government and international organizations can then implement that change. So it does take a lot of work on the ground in order for awareness to be recognized, and a lot of lobbying in order for the right policymakers to say, we need to change the status quo. And I think from just like a bottom-up approach, it's a matter of just inclusion. I'm very intentional about saying, if I'm going to be having a conversation about people who menstruate with disabilities, I don't want to speak on that because I'm not living the experience. I'd rather find the person, or I know people who are disability activists, to come in and speak on that, right? Because that adds to the lobbying to say we're not just speaking from a state of facts and documents, we're speaking from lived experiences, right? So hear us out. But from the top to bottom approach, I think there needs to be a way in which we're not always just having the same conversations in specific silos, where it's just like, okay, girls and education and wash facilities. Because with menstrual health, it is so broad. And we're just barely scratching the surface. And it's good that menstrual health is being seen as a global public health concern. But when we live in societies, especially in the global south or developing countries, or in Africa, for instance, where healthcare is seen as an expensive case, people will then always assume that menstrual health, getting access to these period products, getting access to a gynae, is just a middle and higher class person's privilege or issue, when in fact should be entitled to it. It's a right. So the top has the responsibility to create this infrastructure, this knowledge, to translate it to the bottom to say, do you know that you are entitled to X, Y, and Z as a person who menstruates? And we at the top are trying to put pressure within your society, within your government, to say, you deserve access to this. So instead of having the top-down approach, I think it needs to be equal. We need to remove that structure, right? Because again, it's not like we're implementing a policy about states not wanting to go to war. It's about a lived experience. And that needs to change, in my opinion, and just in terms of how we get the international system to recognize menstrual health as a human right, but also for individuals to realize that this isn't just the responsibility of activists and academics. If you menstruate as a person, you can use your own platform to share about your own experiences, whether it's about PCOS, endometriosis, even if you don't have these period conditions. If you complain about the fact that you go to work and you don't have access to clean, safe wash facilities, you don't have access to period products, you can still use your platform in this digital age to lobby for change. So yeah, it's almost as if there's so many voices happening at the same time. And it's almost as if we don't know where we need to filter it in order for it to be a collective, universal conversation in which then we know how to all move forward. When it comes to activism, structure is important. And the reason why I say this is because the structure helps you balance how you pour into your activism. Because oftentimes what you have to realize is that when you are an activist, when you pour in, don't expect anything in return. It is a career in which you will give a lot. And oftentimes you'll get your recognition, you'll get your flowers, but sometimes you just pour out and that's it. So be very mindful as to how much you give in, especially in spaces where you know are perhaps not safe for you. We have to be very mindful in which that, yes, we are advocating for period positivity in spaces, but there are some spaces that still to this day carry very negative and violent, discriminatory sort of views towards people who menstruate. So if you are wanting to take that role and saying, I want to go into the space and I want people to know about period poverty and I want people to know about period positivity, read the room and adapt, because that's always important. Like, I can't have the same fiery energy that I have when I'm going to kids and teaching them about periods to a board of directors at a corporate. I have to adapt to my audience, but also still know that the content that I present needs to be impactful. That if I'm presenting to a board of directors, I need to know that the aim here is for them to get to know about the lived realities of people who menstruate and work. Versus if my aim is to educate young people about menstrual health, I have more room to have fun and be charismatic. And, I think it's important to always just be adaptable is the most important thing. If you decide to run a nonprofit organization and you want it to not necessarily, because I hate using the thing passion project, because passion project implies that you won't make money. But when we look at a lot of nonprofits around the world, big global ones, they make a lot of money. And so you can still run an organization and still make a living to sustain yourself. What I need you to realize is that your beneficiaries are not your funders. So what I mean by that is the people that you are impacting are not the people that are going to be putting money into your bank account. The people that are going to be putting money into your bank account are your big NGOs, your governments, your private companies that have the corporate social responsibility or corporate social involvement fund to give into your organization. So when you are running a nonprofit company, it is for good, but sometimes you also have to have a very business entrepreneurship mindset to know how to lobby for them to come on board. And by them, I mean your funders, right? So that's something that I've learned as a managing director. So I've given sort of advice as an activist: take care of yourself, be mindful of how you pour into yourself, given advice as a managing director. And then as an individual, as a woman, we are in 2024 and we're still having conversations about having to hide our pads in our pockets, or there are brands that exist globally called whisper, that implicitly imply that you shouldn't talk openly about your period. And for me, it's important to say, as an individual, not as the Minister of Menstruation, that we have a collective responsibility in building a period-friendly world for the next generation of menstruators so that they can talk openly, that they don't have to necessarily feel the need to isolate themselves when they're on their period, that they know that they can go to any public space. And as much as there's toilet paper in that space, they know that there's free period products. So we have that collective responsibility as individuals. And it starts with not only just educating yourself and being aware of policy, but also speaking openly about it. So if you do know that there's someone who's menstruating and you can see that they're in excruciating pain, it's a matter of extending kindness and saying, what can I do to help? Do you need assistance? I think that goes a long way. And I'm not just saying for women and girls and people who menstruate, but for men and boys as well. We have this collective responsibility to build this period-friendly world. And yeah, that is what I think needs to be sort of the focus.